Hey, my friends. Alon Mizrahi here, Freedom Ayatollah, the Mizrahi perspective, and your guide to the end of Israel and Zionism. I haven't used this title for a while, but I did tell you that I have other titles, so this is one of them. Where is Netanyahu? What happened to him? The man has been conspicuously absent for a couple of days already, and his son is not tweeting like he used to do constantly. And there are other signs and clues that something is amiss, something is not right about Netanyahu and his, let's call it, well being. In the very first part of this video, I'm going to give you my most honest assessment of what's going on with Netanyahu and what can be deduced from Israeli media, from the clues that they are giving us. And there are not many clues, but there are some, and they may be important. So this is going to be my opening section today, and I'm going to later talk about what's happening with the war. Because I have to tell you, this is becoming more and more exquisite. This is becoming high quality spy novel material. This is becoming really high quality, and the fact that establishments, the institutions that are in place to provide us with information about what's really going on, whether it is the governments or the media, the fact that they are doing much more concealment than sharing and exposing is only adds to the tension and to the feeling that we are witnessing something really major. So I'm going to talk about what's happening in the war and what's happening in Israel. Um, Again, super interesting, super consequential, and it feels like this war is moving to a new phase. So I'm going to talk about this. My second half of this video is going to be dedicated um, to things that make Iran formidable. Now, I always love to connect my theory and my philosophy with actual events because I think this is the kind of conversation we need to have. We need to always look at the events through the prism of our principled political criticism and the kind of society and the kind of world we want to see. So this is what I'm going to do in the second half of this video, which is only going to be available on my Substack. This is what I call for advanced learners. But I'm going to start with Netanyahu and what's happening to him. And now the speculations about Netanyahu have been going on and spreading for a couple of days already, if not more. And until yesterday evening, I didn't give much. I thought it was just like conspiracy stuff. And I'm not into conspiracies, not because I don't think that power does really shitty things in the shade. Of course it does. But because this is not the kind of stuff I want to dedicate most of my attention to. I like to always look at the things that are clearly visible. Because I think that the meaning of everything is there. It's not in the dark, it's in the light. It's what we see. And this is why the establishment's trying to conceal stuff and hide stuff from us doesn't really work. because it only arouses our suspicions, and we understand that something is not going right. Because if this were things were going their way, they wouldn't be hiding things. They would be sharing things. They would be taking pride in showing off. But they are not doing that. They are becoming more nervous and more restless. So I'm going to get into this in a second. First, I want to talk about Netanyahu. The man has indeed been missing for quite a few days now. So this is like the baseline of what we know. But there's much more other stuff that adds to this cloud of suspicion. The second thing which stands out is the AI video that his formal account released on Thursday evening, Palestine time. Now, this is clearly an AI video, and this is not only the glitches that people detected, and it's worthy of mention, of course, and it's important. But to me, as someone who has followed him for many, many years, and I know all his shticks and gestures and so on, as soon as I hit play on this video, it didn't feel right, and I'll tell you why. And it's not the number of fingers, because I didn't watch long enough to notice this, and this is not the stuff I'm looking for anyway. The thing that stood out to me immediately was his voice and his energy, or the energy of this fictional narrator in this AI video. Because this is not Netanyahu's voice, and this is not his energy. This could pass as his voice and his energy 30 years ago. But Netanyahu is closing on 80. So they're trying to give this impression of him as energetic. And by the way, this whole denial of time uh, and aging that the fascists of our generation are so in love with. This is a whole other subject. But Trump as well. I mean, this pathetic, the hair, the makeup, the Jesus. These are old men, old people, and it's okay to be old. It's graceful and nice and beautiful at times when the people who are aging are normal. Aging is fine. But the way they behave, and they try to create a different false fake image of themselves with this religious zeal. I mean, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with people? We know what's wrong with them. But anyway, this is not Netanyahu's voice. Netanyahu doesn't have this energy. If you click play on this video and close your eyes, you'll immediately get this is not the voice of someone who is 76 or 77 years of age. They overdid the energy level. They were trying to compensate for something. This was the first tell, a big tell that I got from this video. This is not Netanyahu speaking. But when they released this, I had no reason to suspect that something like this was actually going on behind the scenes and something may have happened to him. I mean, there was no reason to consider this. But when he didn't appear for this security briefing, and Israel Katz, the Minister of Defense, gave this briefing, and when you can see how Israeli seniors, I mean, high-ranking officers and politicians look worried, look gray, look out of energy. Yesterday evening, I wrote on my Twitter that something feels off about Israel, and I don't know exactly what this is. I mean, it looks like they have been hit in a way they cannot deny and conceal anymore to themselves. They are still denying and trying to conceal it from the rest of the world. But it feels something about the music has changed. It's not the same. Usually, Israel always talks with arrogance, with stupidity. It's the performance of arrogance, but the content of stupidity. Because they always talk about what they are going to do, like there's no one to counter them, there's no one to work against them, there's nothing that can happen that can sabotage or derail their ambitions and their plans. This is the Israeli way of thinking and doing stuff. But it's like something about this cracked in recent days, and I didn't know what was the. I still don't know for sure, but I know that something happened, something important, something broke. Now, what I had in mind is perhaps Iran was able to neutralize Israeli air force bases, which is then like Israel's strategic long arm, and maybe Iran was able to hit it and destroy some of it, neutralize some of this strategic capability. Or maybe the interceptors were running low, but just today Israel suddenly um, publicly admitted that they were running out of interceptors. And this the timing of this looks a bit suspicious because this happens after 2 days that everyone is asking, where is Netanyahu? What's going on? Something is wrong. And now they come out with this, with the interceptors. And by the way, this sounds reasonable to me because everybody said, including myself, that Israel did not have interceptors for a prolonged campaign, and it was, as it always happens in Israeli wars, they make big statements. They start a war. After 2 weeks, they run out of ammunition. This has always been the case in every Israeli war. But then they call the US and they say, send us more, send us now, emergency. And they have already done this twice in the first 2 weeks of this war. Sorry. Last week they said they had an emergency purchase of some bombs, and now they have something that's a secret. And the way they announced this also, to me, created more suspicion around Netanyahu because they said the government approved the purchase of this and this or that. This is secret. They're not telling what they approved the purchase of. But they said the government approved this, and they didn't mention Netanyahu. Now, Netanyahu never lets anything be said, never lets any credit be given anyone else. He has to be given, just like Trump. Okay, it's about him. He gave the decision, he had the vision, he saw it, he prepared for it, he told them what to do, and so on and so on. But he wasn't even mentioned. So at this crucial moment when Israel is supposedly running out of interceptors, and a major ground operation in Lebanon is being discussed, which Israel cannot carry out because it doesn't have the means, the manpower, it doesn't have the ability. Hezbollah is turned northern Israel into hell. The border areas, they cannot assemble forces properly. And the people are fatigued, and there are sirens nonstop, and there are drones and missiles, and it's practically hell. It's almost impossible. And I think that this is why Israel is trying to negotiate a settlement with the Lebanese government, with French mediation, simply because they know they cannot do this, especially if they assemble a big force of 100,000 soldiers or so, and try to send them into Lebanon, Israel itself becomes fully exposed. What happens if if an intifada breaks out as I expect it to begin? But not now. It's going to take a few more weeks. So they know they can do this, but amid all this very important, very strategic set of considerations, Netanyahu is absent and is not mentioned. So we have this AI clip, we have his absence, we have his son's silence on Twitter, and we have also Israeli media has begun talking about Iran's new leader, Mujtaba. I'm definitely pronouncing his name wrong. Khamenei's son, and all of a sudden they are talking about him and they are speculating that he is dead and he is hurt and so on. And Trump is talking about him. So why are they suddenly talking about the supposed head of Iran dying? So, and we have all of this in this atmosphere of like Leonard Cohen, he has this song everybody knows, and there's this line that you feel like your father or your dog has died. So there's this feeling that something happened, something broke. So none of this is like a definitive proof that Netanyahu is dead or badly injured or so on. But this is very sus. This is very unusual for the head of state to be suddenly disappear at such a crucial juncture for this war, for this effort that he had led for so long. This is weird. And it is especially weird when Israeli media doesn't even mention this. They are not saying anything about this, about all the rumors, and they are all on Twitter. I mean, they see what the whole world is talking about, but no one is mentioning these rumors. And for now, these are just rumors, okay? Because we don't know. We try to deduce and to understand and to decipher, but we don't know. But they are not mentioning this. They are not responding to this. They are not denying this. So, to me, as someone and by the way, my intuition about Israel and its psyche hasn't let me down yet throughout 2.5 years of this. I know and I feel where they are and where they want to go and what they are going through. I can feel and read and see and so on. So it looks like something is wrong. And because I mentioned all of this is about Israel, and Israel is just a small part of this war that's going on. In this weekend, in Christendom, it's still weekend. Um, there are signs in Israel of people beginning to understand that reality is not as advertised. And the IDF is not that all capable, almost supernatural force that they had been let themselves be fooled into believing it is. And it is not. And they should have known better a long, long time ago. I mean, if October 7th didn't break your idea of an IDF invincibility, you have to be stupid. You have to be stupid. Because on October 7, Palestinians from Gaza outwitted, outmaneuvered, and destroyed uh, IDF presence in uh, all across the Gaza border and that area of the country. So if this didn't shake your belief in IDF invincibility, yeah, you have to be stupid. And even before that, I mean, in every Israeli war, they always begin the same. They always begin the same with this machoism and nationalism and sense that we are going to defeat and destroy and conquer and occupy and kill, and no one can stand in our way. And after a couple of weeks, things begin to change, and all the people in all the studios, all the journalists begin. Suddenly, they recollect after 2 or 3 weeks. They recollect that maybe what we said in the beginning is not really achievable right now. And we have to contend with reality. But nevertheless, a year goes by and they do the follow this. This is the same ritual in Israel again and again and again and again and again. But what's unusual about this war, what's different about this war, and why Israel this time is really in over its head in a way it doesn't really understand yet, because the realization is only beginning to descend on them. Because in every Israeli war since the 1960s, this ritual would repeat itself. Israel would go to war. After a while, it would understand that it is into bigger trouble that it had anticipated. And what they would do at this stage is go to the US and ask the US to impose a ceasefire. And it doesn't matter, even if in 1967, when Israel, with American intelligence and guidance, uh, defeated Arab militaries and occupied a big chunk of land, Israel had to achieve ceasefire because Israel, this tiny country, could not expand into the Arab world because the population would kill them. Right? Israel could not expand and occupy Cairo and occupy Amman and so on. Israel could not do this. Israel had to establish a ceasefire. And under this, the umbrella of the ceasefire, Israel could make its initial expansion into a political reality. And this has been the Israeli almost methodology throughout its wars. They would start a war, and after a while, they would realize that they can't accomplish the goals, or that politically this is too complicated. And at this point, they would go to the US and tell the US, use your power and your status as a mediator to impose a ceasefire. But you understand why now this is different. Now the US is part of the war. Now the US cannot impose a ceasefire. So by convincing the US to go to war with Iran, and by finding out late that Iran is this powerful, Israel now realizes what kind of a strategic trap it laid for itself. Because now they have no one to go to impose a ceasefire. The Iranians are not answering America's phone calls. They're not answering. The US is telling them, we are going to bombard you, and the Iranians are saying, send your ships, send your airplanes, send your troops. Don't call us. There's no negotiations. Bring it on. Bring it on. Do whatever you want to do. Do whatever you can do. And we find out that the US cannot do much. And throughout the 12-day war, I said it like many times, and this was um, uh, I said the US can do nothing to Iran. I wrote this on my Twitter. The US can do nothing to Iran. You'll see that when the US decides to go to war with Iran, you'll see that the US can do nothing to Iran. And Iran is the superpower in West Asia. And it was like far out. It was like far out. But now we can see that this is actually the reality. The US can do nothing to stop Iran. So now Israel dragged the US into war. It has lost its diplomatic, how should I call it, companion, patron, someone who had the power and the image to impose, to lead to a ceasefire. But now the US is out of the diplomatic game entirely. So what does Israel do when it realizes, which is now beginning to happen, and I think that senior command are already seeing this. They have reached this point that they have reached in every Israeli war. This happened when they fought against Hezbollah in 2006. This happened in the second Intifada. This happened so many wars in Gaza, in previous operations. They always reach this point when ammunition is running out. Diplomatically, they are beginning to be hated throughout the world, and countries are angry, and people are angry with them. And this is becoming too complicated and too dangerous. They need to back out. They go to the US. The US imposes a ceasefire. Now they don't have this mechanism. So what do? When they don't have enough ammunition, they don't have enough soldiers, they don't have interceptors, and potentially they don't have Netanyahu, which they see as an asset and we see as a demon, and as a liability, as a mass murderer, as the scum of the scum. I feel violated just by uttering his name. It really defies me as a human being just to mention the name of this demon. And I think that more or less, and it doesn't matter if Netanyahu is dead or just wounded or sick or had a panic attack or he is actually alive, it doesn't change the equation that Israel is facing a formidable enemy that's not stopping, that has a strategic vision that goes completely against everything Israel has tried to build for 80 years in West Asia. And now everything is going up in smoke. And this enemy is much stronger, has a much 100 times bigger, better, and more superior strategic depth and strategic thinking, and the ability to create alliances and to work across borders. This is the mess Israel is now in. And as I've said, and I don't want to push this narrative now because this is not yet the time, and this is not the video. But we are following the script that I've seen and I've described that leads to Israel's action demise and Israel's action disintegration and Israel's actual end. This is the script we are watching now. But I don't want to talk about Israel anymore in this video. I'm going to do this uh, in a dedicated video, or maybe one, more than one, that I'm going to dedicate to the Israeli issue, the Israeli aspect of things. I want to move on to what Iran is doing and what is happening on the bigger battlefield. What is happening on the bigger battlefield? Because this is really fascinating. This is really fascinating. We are now seeing, by the way, this is the transition, that Israel is not a big problem and a major obstacle for Iran. Israel is almost a side issue. Iran is fighting the US that built bases all around it for decades and decades and decades, and collected intelligence and sent saboteurs and agents and spies into the country, and did everything it can for decades to destabilize and bring down Iran. Iran is fighting the US, a big, mighty US, and Israel is still a side issue. Now, Israel is sustaining heavy damages. You have no doubt about this. But let's look at the war that Iran is waging, because this is where the beauty lies. This is where the beauty lies. And in my previous video, which I really recommend for everyone who's watching me for the first time in this video, to watch the previous video, because I break down how Iran is having different conversations with different parties to this conflict, to this war. And this is something we need to keep in mind, and I don't want to repeat this now. But on top of what I described in the previous video about the different conversations that Iran is having with different audiences, and I described war as a form of conversation, because this is what war is. It's a conversation. So I want to add something to this, and let us see that Iran is waging at this moment at least 3 wars at the same time. 3 wars, 3 distinct wars. The first war that Iran is waging is the war against the United States of America, a direct full-on military confrontation. And from what we're seeing and from what we are not allowed to see, we can easily understand that Iran is winning this hands down. Iran has been able to push the US away. The US has not been able to close in on Iran, to bite into its territory, to disrupt or deny any aspect of Iranian sovereignty, of Iranian functionality, of Iranian power. But Iran has been able to disrupt and destroy and sabotage and push away the US in a major way. And this is the first war Iran is fighting. Iran has taken on, it was forced to, stupidly by Israel. And Iran seems to be managing this war with strategic brilliance and operational, again, amazing capability on the side of the Iranian armed forces. This is the first war. The second war that Iran is waging is the political/military war against its Arab neighbors. Iran is striving to change the political reality of West Asia, its immediate vicinity, its immediate neighborhood. Iran is moving to create a new West Asia where US doesn't control regimes around it directly and is not able to build military might on Iran's doorstep and create a regional reality, a regional political reality that is detrimental and dangerous to Iran. So, and this is the second war Iran is fighting. The third war Iran is fighting is the war against Israel. Now, you can identify through their action what Iran's priorities are. And you can see that Iran's first and foremost priority was causing as much damage and neutralizing as much as of American military might in the region as possible. This was their first priority. Hitting American bases, installations, radar stations, THAAD missile systems, and so on and so on. The first thing they did in this, when the war broke, and in the next half of this video, I'm going to talk about what characterizes Iran and makes it so formidable. But there's clear strategy here. There's clear strategy and discipline. So the first priority that Iran decided to follow is hitting the US and preventing the US from amassing forces and posing a credible military threat against Iran. This was their first priority. And the three are not separate and not subsequent, but there's like a slight, tiny delay in terms of the attention Iran is giving to each one and its place in what it's doing. So immediately as they started hitting the US, they began also to apply pressure to Arab Gulf countries around them. And you can see that in this effort, which is partly political, it has economic aspects, and it has, of course, military aspects, because Iran is using military might to further its political objectives in the Gulf. And you can see that Iran is, again, and this is a very clear characteristic of the Iranian modus operandi, the way they operate. They are really sharp thinkers, the Iranians. When they decided to change the political reality in the Gulf, they didn't just go in and bomb everyone. And they didn't even bomb everyone the same when they decided to bomb. You can see that they always create separation and division in the enemy camp. And this is something I also spoke about in my previous video. So you can see that Dubai, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia are not getting the same treatment. Iran prioritizes and creates this division. And you can see that they apply much more brutal pressure to Dubai, which is, of course, also more sensitive and more evil and disgusting. They're applying more pressure to the Emiratis and Bahrain than they do to Kuwait, and a little less than that to Saudi Arabia. And again, there's strategic thinking in this. They don't want to push the Arabs to go to war against them if they don't have to. This is the principle I'm going to use. Just the precise amount of power and violence I have to use. This is not the American method of I'm going to use as much power as I have at a given moment and hope that this gets me the prize I want. Iranians work differently. They are considering their options and they are actively looking for the minimal amount of effort and violence and power that they need to apply. And because they work with this strategic thinking and patience, this gives them huge room for maneuver and a much more sophisticated and complex conversation with their adversaries and with the people around them, because they apply just enough pressure and just enough violence to let the recipients consider what they want to do and what they have to do and what their options are. So they apply pressure with really meticulous consideration, with deep thought. And I'm not just admiring Iran for nothing. In my second half of this video, I'm going to talk about this a little more, but we need to be students of the game. We need to learn from the best. This is the way you handle a very complicated, high stakes conflict. Look at what Iran is doing. They are not winning this just because they have excellent missiles and drones. So I described the first war against the US. I described the second war against the Arab Gulf monarchies. And Israel is the third one. And it looks like, and it makes a lot of sense, that Israel is the least urgent for Iran. First of all, because Israel is the least dangerous in terms of imminent threat. Israel cannot be a staging ground for an invasion into Iran. Israel doesn't share a border with Iran. So it makes sense for the Iranians to go after the Americans. Secondly, change the political reality in their immediate surroundings, and then go after Israel, which is farther away and needs to be dealt with differently. And the other element of this, which is also wise, they know that Israel doesn't have the breadth for a long campaign, for a long war. They know Israel. They've studied how Israel fights. What I described earlier about Israel's style, of course the Iranians know and Hamas know. They are not stupid. Palestinians are not stupid, and Hamas are not stupid, and Iran is not stupid. So they know how Israel fights and how Israel thinks. And they also know that because they are now in open war with the US, and China and Russia are on their side, there is no one to impose a ceasefire. And it is in their strategic interest to prolong the war with Israel, because they know that time is now an Iranian weapon as far as fighting Israel goes. Because every day that goes by, Israeli businesses are shut. Israeli kids don't go to school. Israel's finances are being ruined. Israel's economy is being destroyed. Israel's relationships. We saw Spain almost completely disconnecting itself, disengaging from any contact with Israel. So they are using time strategically as a weapon to weaken Israel. And they know that by shooting a few small barrages every day, they are causing Israel huge damages. And now they are eroding Israel's strategic abilities. They are not letting Israel rearm, regroup, rest. By applying, again, this is the method, using the least amount of power and violence you need to achieve your goals, not the maximum, the minimum. And so after 2 weeks, with this approach, with this patience, and by using really a fraction of their arsenal, and treading carefully and with a lot of strategic thought, like the Iranians do. They know that they always maintain a big, healthy reserve in terms of manpower, in terms of firepower. They know that they are ready. If things go out of hand, they are ready. They have what to fight with. They don't need to call anyone and tell them, send us emergency ammunition because we are out of it. They don't need to do this. They are ready. And I think that by working like this and working to create division and separation the air, by hitting the US hardest and forcing the Arab Gulf to make serious, tough political choices, they are they broke actually the Western American alliance in West Asia. It doesn't exist anymore. Now Israel, the Arab Gulf, and the US are three separate entities, each looking after its own interests, its long term interests. Now Israel and the US are not fully aligned anymore. The US wants a way out of this already. Whatever they say, and even if the Israel lobby is strong enough to force the US to continue this and to escalate this, still its interests are not aligned with Israel's interests. And the Arab Gulf already understands that its interests are not aligned with the US. And Israel understands, and they also understand that Israel is not their ally. And Iran will force them to distance themselves from Israel. So this is the genius of the Iranian approach. They broke the enemy's advance and front. They created divisions and fractures. And now they are dealing with each party separately. And they have prevented the formation of a coalition. And they do this also geniusly by, again, this approach of using the minimal power they need to achieve their goals. They didn't close the Hormuz Strait hermetically for everyone. They said, okay, you can pass. Turkey, okay, you can pass. India, maybe. Pakistan, we think so. And by applying this logic, again, they create separation and they prevent the formation of a big international front against them. And we already see the Italian prime minister just 2 days ago said Italy is not going to be a part of this war. And Europe in general doesn't want to be a part of this war. And now Iran controls them simply by being smart and using the Hormuz Strait strategically. And not just bombing everything and closing it and that's all, which would cause a major international coalition to be formed and go to war with them. And they don't want this. And so this is how they preempted this scenario. Now, as to Israel, and this is the last piece of the puzzle of this part of the video. Once Iran senses that the US has lost its will to fight this war, and not only its will, its ability. First, they hurt America's ability. And now the US again has to make a choice. Does it commit further? And this is very complicated politically, and this is very dangerous. What if they're sending 2,500 Marines, and what happens if they lose a big number of soldiers? What happens then? I mean, can the US now have a major war effort in this economic situation, in this political atmosphere, highly, highly, highly unlikely and unreasonable. It's not something they can do. It's nearly impossible. And if they try to do something like this, I think that the most reasonable effect of this would be actual political collapse in the US. Because I don't see millions of young American men going to join the military and going over to fight in Iran. And this is going to be a suicide mission because Iran is ready for this scenario as well. So how are they going to get there? And this is going to take years of preparations. This is going to cause a financial catastrophe for the US, and the dollar is already losing its dominance. And the Iranians, again, brilliantly are floating this idea. And floating is a good word for the Strait of Hormuz. They are floating the idea of only letting ships pass when the cargo was paid for using the Chinese money, basically the Chinese currency. So Iran has been managing this. This is a masterclass, seriously, a masterclass in management. This is much better than any course you can take online. This is the real deal. This is the real deal. But just to close this thing that I opened with Israel. Once Iran realizes, according to its own milestones, its own plan, its own thinking, that they have pushed the US enough and they have prevented the possibility of a major war against a coalition of countries. And once they have realized, they feel satisfied that political momentum in the Gulf is in their favor, is changing in their favor, which is happening, which is happening. And you need to remember that Iran still has major reserves that it hasn't used. It hasn't used its ground forces at all in this war. It hasn't used Yemen, and Yemen is a big, potent, capable army. They still haven't used them. And they have Hezbollah in Iraq, which have they have done many things already. But this is really still small scale. This is an actual military of 100,000 people or more, an actual military that could take over Syria or destabilize Jordan. Remember where Iraq is situated, with ease. So the Iranians are prepared for an unexpected escalation, which doesn't even seem likely at this point, because the West is so weak and so dependent on oil and so corrupt and slow that it doesn't look that they are going to be able to respond in an effective way, even if they want it. And they don't want this. They don't want this. So having achieved enough progress in War One and War Two against the US and the Arab monarchies, Iranians are going to move to focus on Israel. This would be the third and final war for them, which no one is going to stop diplomatically and no one is capable of doing. And if they can create separation between the US and Israel, this is going to be epic. Not epic fury, epic Iran. If they can push the US to understand that that this is not in its interests to continue to pursue this war, and they're better off pulling away and basically relinquish West Asia, then Israel is left alone. Israel is left alone without its main backer in this dire situation that it's already beginning to experience. And then Iran is going to focus all their attention, or much of their attention, on destroying Israel. Then Israel would be weakened enough, ripe enough for the beginning of actual devastation, actual destabilization, actual destruction. And it's hard to tell when this phase is going to arrive. But I am confident that it is going to arrive, that it is coming. The Iranians remember that it is Israel who pushed for this war, that it is Israel who pushed for the 12-day war, that it is Israel who pushed for the assassination of Khamenei, that it is Israel who has been pushing for sanctions against Iran, which cost them an endless, something we cannot even appreciate correctly. It's a second generation of severe, paralyzing sanctions initiated by Israel and Netanyahu. The Iranians are not forgetting this, and they are not forgetting what Israel did to Gaza. They are not forgetting what Israel did and is doing to Lebanon. They are not forgetting what Israel did to Sudan through its bitch, the UAE. Sorry, pardon my French. What they are trying to do to Somalia, again, through the UAE. Iran is at least a regional superpower. It sees what's happening. It keeps track of everything, and it knows. It's been stated clearly, again with the same Israeli arrogance, which is really stupidity. Israel declared that it is after Iran's death that they are trying to strangulate and murder Iran and destroy it and break it into different countries. And all this stupid talk, like they're high on something. So Iran now knows that the US is the big problem militarily that they need to solve, and the Arab Gulf is the big political problem that they need to solve. But Israel is the root cause. Israel is the actual pain. It's the ideological and the cultural deep enemy of Iran in the region. And Iran cannot go on to pretend existing while Israel is allowed to survive and plan the next round of aggression against Iran and the next round of sanctions and whatever fuckery they will come up with. So Israel's misery has barely begun, and it's going to be extremely painful and stressful for Israelis. Extremely painful and stressful. I'm ending this part of the video here, and to all my viewers on YouTube, I'm saying thank you. People who are watching this on Substack, I'm going to go on to the